Thank you. We're here to have a very brief exposition about a very serious topic, but one that also is quite hopeful. In my experience, there's a sort of dividing line. People over and below the age of 50, if you lived in New York or any metropolitan area in the early 1980s, you began to see the terrible toll that the AIDS epidemic was having, and very many of us lost friends and family members and others, and we saw the terrible decimation that occurred in the artist community and a lot of other communities. But it's also clear that younger people have moved on, and even the most dreadful experiences like war somehow recede a little bit in the public consciousness. So I think it's especially to the credit of these two young men that they took the lead in creating a memorial both to the many people, it's estimated 100,000 people in New York City alone, who died of AIDS, and to the many people who responded to the crisis in many different ways. And they are also an example of, I think, a very hopeful trend in our society and in our city, which is community-generated initiatives. They took the lead. They were following examples like the High Line and others around the city, but they did it on their own, and they did it right in the sense that they found a way for both the developer and the government agencies that needed to cooperate and approve of this idea could do so. And as important, they did it in a way that generated broader and broader support from a wider and wider community. So the two people that I'm happy to introduce are Christopher Tepper, who's the Director of Development and Planning at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and Paul Kelterborn, who is the Manager of Public Programs and Community Engagement here at MAS, and in fact, in that role, he did a lot to help plan today's conference. So I'm happy to turn the rest over to them.
Thank you very much, Randy. Randy's been a huge inspiration for our project, and we wouldn't be where we are today without him. In April 2010, St. Vincent's Hospital went bankrupt, and it was a very important institution for New York City, for Lower Manhattan, for over 150 years, so there was a lot of press obituaries about the institution. But there was a particular article by David Frant in New York Magazine in April that was about the role that St. Vincent's played in the history of the AIDS crisis. It was the first AIDS ward in New York City. It was one of the largest AIDS wards consistently throughout the early years of the crisis, one of the nation's most important HIV/AIDS clinical care centers. And because of its location in the West Village and adjacent to the Chelsea neighborhoods, it really became the epicenter of the AIDS crisis, and symbolically the epicenter. And so when I read that article, it really started a period of reflection about how little I knew about the AIDS crisis, and a series of discussions between Paul and I, and reflecting on that was actually something that we found as a general problem in our peers of people, as Randy said, who are 35 and below, that there's been this forgetting that's happened so quickly. And so we wanted to get involved and find a way to preserve, commemorate the history of the site and do something, provide some kind of tribute in the redevelopment plans. The hospital campus is being converted into a 450-unit residential complex, and as part of that development, the developer Rudin Management needs to build new public open space. And that open space, part of that open space requirement is going to be fulfilled on a triangle of land that's bordered by 7th Avenue, 12th Street in Greenwich. You can see we're looking north here at the O'Toole building with St. Vincent's on the side. And one of the reasons we focused on that piece of property really quickly was because not only was it going to be a new, essentially new public park, new open space, and therefore be accessible and visible, but this site really, we realized really quickly, was at a unique nexus of the history of the AIDS crisis, not only because of St. Vincent's across the street, which I just talked about, but also because the LGBT Community Center, which is just a block away, is where ACT UP and other AIDS organizations and advocacy groups first organized. So you had this special site for place-based preservation. When we got involved, we had this idea then to build a memorial at the site. And we realized really quickly that having an idea, you have to engage with the process. The site was part of a rezoning. And I think we learned a couple of lessons throughout the process that are really applicable or relevant to anybody who wants to get involved in their own preservation project or in a land use process. And the first is really about community engagement. Can't underestimate the importance of engaging with the community board. Actually, Brad Hoylman, the former community board chair from CB2, is here today, and he was a huge help in giving us advice and guiding us through the process. Engaging with the community and other neighborhood stakeholders, in our case, many LGBT and AIDS advocacy groups, but also block associations and groups like the Municipal Art Society and Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation that get involved in good urban planning and land use. The other, I think, second major point that we learned really quickly is that the land use process in New York City is incredibly complicated. ULURP is somewhat opaque, and there's zoning laws and building code and the environmental impact statement and review process. It's really important to engage technical professionals early in the process because there's windows of opportunity, and you have to make sure that you lay those out and lay out a roadmap, or you can quickly miss out your opportunity to impact the process. I think the third major lesson we learned really early on is that you have to present a credible alternative. When we met with the community board early on and people in the neighborhood, we were met with a lot of support and enthusiasm for the idea, but Paul and I didn't actually have an alternative plan for the park or for a memorial in the park. And so it was hard for people to really support us robustly until we could provide an actual vision for that site. And the way that Paul and I thought about how to come up with inspiring ideas for what a memorial at the site and the park could be was through a design competition. And we're fortunate today in that there are a lot of online platforms that allow design competition administration and really have lowered the costs and hurdles to putting on something like this and engaging the international design community. And we used a company called Architizer that one of their business lines is to administer design competitions. I think one of the important roles, and then as we put on this design competition, was creating a jury that really reflected the community and the community stakeholders I talked about before. People from the AIDS advocacy and HIV community, people from the LGBT community, people from the local neighborhood, people from the community board. Brad was one of our jury members. And so we put together this very representative group, which I think really helped elevate the ideas that came out of the competition.
And I'll talk quickly because I know I've been encouraging everyone else to stick to their time today. Chris is talking about community engagement, and it wasn't just about putting together a representative jury. And believe me, we were so amazed when everyone we asked kept saying yes that they would join our jury. We also launched an exhibit in partnership with the Center for Architecture so that we could engage even more broadly and everyone could come and see the results of the design competition and offer their opinions about it. We hosted a panel discussion there. And that, of course, is in the West Village also. And press helps, too. It was serendipitous for us that Robin Finn from the New York Times wrote this article about the project, and it really kind of catapulted us, a number of our supporters and key donors now learned about the project in the article. And we have a lot of other tools for reaching people now with social media. We're active on Facebook and Twitter and our website, AIDSmemorialPark.org, to keep people informed and let them know about upcoming community board meetings, et cetera. But like land use in New York and engaging with the ULURP process is complicated, and so you have to be prepared for compromise and setbacks, as we learned. But there was a very good outcome. Working through the process with City Council, a portion of the park was designated for an AIDS memorial, a large portion, a significant piece. You can see it. It's kind of the top left corner of the park. And a process was outlined for us to come back to community board meetings and get more design input on what the final memorial looked like. So that's what we did. We went on kind of a listening tour. We first heard from people about what people who lived in the neighborhood, what they wanted to see as part of the memorial. We took notes. We worked with the team that won the design competition to revise their winning scheme. It ended up being something entirely different. But in some ways, I think it's good because it's something that's beautiful, it's meaningful, it's significant, and because it has such a broad base of support now in the community, I think it's something that will be, a lot more people have ownership and stewardship for it. So we're moving forward with this new design. We're fundraising. We're meeting with relevant city agencies to finish all of the sign-offs, and we're really excited about the new design. So, thank you.